The call came at 3 a.m. A bloodied man had crawled through the woods with 5 bullet wounds in his body. His wife was dead, his sons were dead, and his teenage daughter was missing. When police found 16-year-old Erin Caffey hours later, she wasn't kidnapped or in danger. She was hiding in a trailer with her boyfriend, the same boyfriend who had just slaughtered her family, the same boyfriend she had helped plan the murders with. We think we know our children. We believe we understand what teenagers are capable of, but behind bedroom doors and whispered conversations, some harbor darkness that defies comprehension. Today, we're diving into 4 of the most chilling cases of teenage girls who committed the ultimate betrayal, murdering their own parents. These aren't stories of momentary rage or accidents. These are calculated, cold-blooded killings carried out by daughters against the very people who raised them. You'll hear about Erin Caffey, the pastor's daughter from Texas who orchestrated her family's massacre because they disapproved of her boyfriend. You'll meet Jasmine Richardson, who at just 12 years old, yes, 12, helped her adult boyfriend slaughter her parents and younger brother in their Canadian home. Then there's Crystal Brooke Howell, who shot her father in the head, hid his body in a storage shed, and turned his cabin into a party house while his corpse decomposed nearby. And finally, Ashley Martinson, the online horror writer known as Vamp Chick, who murdered her mother and stepfather in their Wisconsin home before comforting her younger sisters and fleeing. These stories will challenge everything you think you know about family bonds, teenage psychology, and the capacity for evil that can exist in the most unexpected places. Before we dive deeper, take a second to hit subscribe. You'll want to know when our next investigation drops. This channel is dedicated to uncovering the darkest corners of human behavior, and trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Where are you watching from today? Let me know in the comments. I'm always curious about where our true crime community is tuning in from. It's fascinating to see how these stories resonate with people from different states, cities, and even countries. Alba, Texas, population 504. The kind of small town where everyone knows everyone, where church on Sunday isn't just a tradition, but a cornerstone of community life. It's the kind of place where serious crime is so rare that when it happens, it tears through the social fabric like wildfire. In this tight-knit East Texas community, the Caffey family was well respected. Terry Caffey served as a music minister at the local church, his voice leading the congregation in worship each week. His wife Penny homeschooled their 3 children and played piano during services. Together, they raised 16-year-old Erin, 13-year-old Matthew, and 8-year-old Tyler in a household centered around faith, family values, and Christian principles. From the outside, the Caffeys embodied the American dream, a devoted couple raising their children with strong moral foundations in a peaceful rural setting. Their modest single-story home sat at the end of a long, winding driveway surrounded by pine trees, offering the privacy and tranquility that many seek in country living. Erin, their only daughter, was by all accounts a sweet, church-going girl with a beautiful singing voice that she'd inherited from her father. She sang in the church choir, participated in youth group activities, and seemed to embrace the religious upbringing her parents provided. Neighbors and church members described her as polite, well-mannered, and respectful, the kind of daughter any parent would be proud to raise. But beneath this picture-perfect facade, a storm was brewing. In late 2007, Erin began dating Charlie Wilkinson, a 19-year-old high school dropout with a troubled past. Charlie had a reputation for drug use and had been in minor scrapes with the law. He was everything the Caffeys didn't want for their daughter, older, rebellious, and with values that contradicted their Christian beliefs. When Terry and Penny discovered the relationship, they did what most protective parents would do. They intervened. They restricted Erin's phone privileges, monitored her activities more closely, and finally, after catching her sneaking out to meet Charlie, they delivered an ultimatum: end the relationship or face stricter consequences. For Erin, this parental boundary wasn't seen as protection, but as persecution. The teenage mind, still developing its capacity for long-term thinking and emotional regulation, often experiences parental restrictions as personal attacks. But Erin's reaction would go far beyond typical teenage rebellion. In secret conversations with Charlie, Erin's frustration morphed into something darker. What began as venting about strict parents evolved into fantasies of freedom. Freedom that could only be achieved in their warped thinking by eliminating the obstacle entirely. Charlie suggested that they could just kill them, and instead of recoiling in horror, Erin entertained the idea. The plot expanded to include Charlie's friend, Charles Allen Wade, 20, and his girlfriend, Bobby Gail Johnson, 18. Together, the four conspirators developed a plan that was as simple as it was horrific. Charlie and Charles would enter the Caffey home at night, kill the entire family, and set the house on fire to destroy evidence. Erin would be kidnapped to avoid suspicion, and the young couple could start a new life together. Text messages recovered later would reveal Erin's active participation in planning her family's murder. "Do you think I should wake up and say goodbye to them or not?" she texted Charlie the night before the attack. The response, "Don't say goodbye, just let them sleep." In the early morning hours of March 1, 2008, Charlie Wilkinson and Charles Wade approached the Caffey home armed with guns and a samurai sword. Bobby Johnson waited in the car with Erin parked down the road. The attackers entered through an unlocked door around 2 a.m. They first went to the master bedroom where Terry and Penny were sleeping. Wade fired multiple shots at Terry, hitting him 5 times, in the head, back, and shoulders. Miraculously, none of the wounds were immediately fatal. Penny woke to the gunfire and began screaming. Wilkinson attacked her with the samurai sword, inflicting over 100 wounds and nearly decapitating her. Her death was brutal and immediate. The commotion woke 13-year-old Matthew, who came to investigate. He was shot multiple times and then stabbed. 8-year-old Tyler, the youngest Caffey, was stabbed to death in his bed. To cover their tracks, the killers set fire to the house using lighter fluid they had brought with them. They fled, believing everyone inside was dead and that the fire would destroy all evidence. But Terry Caffey wasn't dead. Despite 5 bullet wounds and losing a substantial amount of blood, he regained consciousness as flames engulfed his home. In what can only be described as superhuman determination, Terry pulled himself across the floor and out of the burning house. Unable to walk, he crawled nearly 300 yards through the woods to his nearest neighbor's house, leaving a trail of blood in the snow. When he reached the neighbor's porch, he banged on the door with his last remaining strength. "My wife and sons are dead," he told the shocked neighbor who answered. "My house is on fire. My daughter is missing." Emergency responders rushed Terry to the hospital, while firefighters battled the blaze that had already consumed most of the Caffey home. Inside, they would find the charred remains of Penny, Matthew, and Tyler. As Terry fought for his life in the hospital, investigators launched a search for Erin, presumed kidnapped. But within hours, the investigation took a shocking turn. A tip led authorities to Charlie Wilkinson's trailer, where they found him with Erin, not as a hostage but as a willing companion. Under questioning, Charlie quickly confessed, implicating Erin, Wade, and Johnson. The web of lies unraveled rapidly. Investigators discovered text messages between the conspirators detailing the murder plot. Erin's involvement became undeniable. All 4 were arrested and charged with capital murder. The prosecution had a strong case: physical evidence from the crime scene, Charlie's confession, the recovered text messages, and eventually testimony from Bobby Johnson, who agreed to cooperate in exchange for a lesser sentence. Charlie Wilkinson and Charles Wade both pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty and received life sentences without the possibility of parole. Bobby Johnson, who had waited in the car but participated in planning, received 40 years. For Erin, the legal process was complicated by her age and her father's remarkable position. Despite losing his wife and sons and nearly dying himself, Terry Caffey did something extraordinary. He forgave his daughter. While recovering in the hospital, Terry had a spiritual experience that led him to believe God wanted him to forgive Erin. This forgiveness didn't mean Terry wanted Erin to escape justice, but it did influence his preference that she not receive the death penalty, which prosecutors could have sought had she been tried as an adult. Ultimately, Erin accepted a plea deal, admitting her role in planning the murders. She was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms plus 25 years, with eligibility for parole after 40 years. She will be in her mid-50s before she can even be considered for release. From behind prison walls at the Mountain View unit in Gatesville, Texas, Erin has given interviews expressing remorse. "I was young and stupid," she told Piers Morgan in one interview. "I was 16. You're not thinking like an adult. I made a lot of bad decisions." Terry Caffey's journey continued beyond the courtroom. He eventually remarried and became a public speaker, sharing his story of survival, loss, and forgiveness. He even wrote a book titled Terror by Night, detailing his experience and spiritual journey. In one of the most poignant moments of this tragic story, Terry visited Erin in prison. "I love you," he told his daughter, the same daughter who had conspired to kill him. "I forgive you." When asked how he could possibly forgive such a betrayal, Terry's answer reflected his deep faith. "Forgiveness isn't for the other person. It's for you. It's so you can move on. You." The Caffey case stands as a stark reminder that evil can lurk in the most unexpected places, even in the heart of a pastor's daughter in a quiet Texas town. It's incredible how quickly lives can change. What time is it where you're watching? For some of these families, everything changed in just minutes. Terry Caffey went from peaceful sleep to losing everything in less than an hour. Life can turn on a dime. Just north of the Montana border lies Medicine Hat, Alberta, a Canadian city that shares much in common with many mid-sized American towns. With about 63,000 residents, it's the kind of place where violent crime is rare enough to make headlines, where families move for affordable housing and safe neighborhoods. If you're watching from somewhere like Billings, Montana, or Fargo, North Dakota, the setting would feel familiar. Prairie landscapes, harsh winters, and tight-knit communities where neighbors know each other by name. In this seemingly ordinary city lived the Richardson family, Mark and Deborah, both in their early 40s, with their daughter Jasmine and 8-year-old son Jacob. Mark worked in the oil and gas industry that dominates the region's economy, while Deborah was employed at a local hospital. They lived in a modest 2-story home in a newer subdivision, the kind of neighborhood where children ride bikes on sidewalks and families gather for weekend barbecues. The Richardsons were, by all accounts, normal parents raising normal children. They attended school functions, enforced reasonable rules, and tried to guide their children through the challenges of growing up. Nothing about them suggested they would become victims of one of the most shocking crimes in Canadian history. What makes this case particularly disturbing, and what separates it from almost every other family murder, is the age of the perpetrator. Jasmine Richardson wasn't 16 or 17 when she helped murder her family. She was 12 years old. Let that sink in for a moment. At an age when most children are still playing with toys, watching Disney movies, and adjusting to middle school, Jasmine Richardson was plotting to kill her parents and younger brother. The trouble began when Jasmine, despite her young age, developed an interest in the goth subculture. While many teenagers experiment with alternative fashion and music as a form of self-expression, Jasmine's fascination took a darker turn when she met 23-year-old Jeremy Steinke at a punk rock concert in 2006. The age gap was staggering, a 12-year-old 6th grader and a man old enough to have graduated college. In any jurisdiction in North America, their relationship would be considered statutory rape. But beyond the illegal nature of their connection, there was something deeply disturbing about Steinke himself. Jeremy Steinke wasn't just an adult pursuing a child. He was a troubled individual who claimed to be a 300-year-old werewolf and wore a vial of blood around his neck. His online presence was filled with violent imagery, references to drinking blood, and an obsession with serial killers. On his web profiles, he described himself as crazy and insane and expressed admiration for natural-born killers. In any healthy family, parents would immediately intervene in such a relationship, and the Richardsons did exactly that. When they discovered their 12-year-old daughter was communicating with a 23-year-old man who claimed to be a werewolf, they did what responsible parents should do. They forbade the relationship and restricted Jasmine's internet access. For Jasmine, this parental boundary became an unforgivable offense. In online messages to Steinke, she complained about her parents' rules and restrictions. Their digital conversations quickly escalated from typical teenage complaints to something far more sinister. "I have a plan," Jasmine wrote to Steinke. "It begins with me killing them and ends with me living with you." Instead of reporting these disturbing messages to authorities or seeking help for the clearly troubled child, Steinke encouraged her fantasies. The pair began to style themselves after Mickey and Mallory from the film Natural-Born Killers, romanticizing the idea of being outlaws together. "I'm so happy with you," Steinke wrote back. "I can't live without you. If they don't allow us to be together, I will kill them." What followed was a series of messages planning the murders in detail. They discussed methods, timing, and what they would do afterward. These weren't vague fantasies, but specific plans that they fully intended to carry out. On April 23, 2006, the plan was put into action. After midnight, Steinke entered the Richardson home through a basement window that Jasmine had left unlocked. He went upstairs and attacked Mark Richardson first, stabbing him repeatedly in the chest and throat. When Deborah Richardson came to investigate the noise, Steinke stabbed her multiple times as well. While this was happening, Jasmine went to her brother Jacob's bedroom. The 8-year-old boy, likely confused and terrified by the commotion, saw his sister and may have felt a moment of relief. A familiar face amid the chaos. That relief would have been short-lived. Jasmine Richardson, at just 12 years old, took a knife and stabbed her little brother to death in his bed. The couple then fled the scene, driving to a nearby town where they stayed with an acquaintance of Steinke's. They behaved as if nothing had happened, even going to a party the following evening. The bodies were discovered the next day when Jacob failed to show up for a playdate with a friend. The friend's concerned mother went to the Richardson home and saw what appeared to be bodies through the window. She called police, who discovered the horrific scene inside. Initially, authorities believed Jasmine was also a victim, possibly kidnapped by the killer. A massive search was launched to find the missing 12-year-old. But within 24 hours, investigators uncovered the online messages between Jasmine and Steinke. The search for a victim became a manhunt for a killer. The couple was arrested the following day at their friend's home. When taken into custody, neither showed significant remorse. In fact, witnesses reported that they had been affectionate with each other, kissing and holding hands in the hours after the murders. The legal proceedings that followed were complicated by Jasmine's age. At 12, she was the youngest person ever charged with multiple first-degree murder in Canada. Under Canadian law, she could not be identified publicly during the trial due to the Youth Criminal Justice Act, and she could not be tried as an adult. Jeremy Steinke's trial came first. His defense attempted to argue that he was under Jasmine's influence, portraying her as the mastermind and him as a follower. The jury didn't buy it. After deliberating for less than 3 hours, they found him guilty on 3 counts of first-degree murder. He received 3 life sentences, with no possibility of parole for 25 years. Jasmine's trial presented unique challenges for the Canadian justice system. How do you appropriately punish a 12-year-old for such a heinous crime? How do you balance justice for the victims with the recognition that the perpetrator is still a child? In court, Jasmine's defense team presented evidence that she had been manipulated by Steinke, arguing that she was under the influence of an adult predator. They pointed to her young age and developing brain as factors that limited her capacity to understand the full consequences of her actions. The prosecution countered with the detailed planning evident in her online messages and the cold-blooded nature of the crimes, particularly her murder of her younger brother. Ultimately, Jasmine was found guilty on 3 counts of first-degree murder. Because of her age, she received the maximum sentence possible under the Youth Criminal Justice Act, 10 years, with 4 years to be served in a psychiatric facility and the remaining 6 under conditional supervision in the community. This sentence sparked outrage among many, who felt it was far too lenient for triple homicide. The idea that someone could murder their entire family and be free by their early 20s struck many as a failure of justice. Nevertheless, Jasmine Richardson served her sentence as prescribed. During her time in custody, she reportedly made significant progress in therapy, earning her high school diploma and eventually attending university classes. Mental health professionals who worked with her described her as responsive to treatment and remorseful for her actions. In 2016, Jasmine Richardson completed her sentence and was released into the community with no conditions. She was given a new identity and the opportunity to start fresh, a second chance that her parents and brother would never receive. Today, she lives anonymously somewhere in Canada. Her case remains highly controversial, raising difficult questions about juvenile justice, rehabilitation versus punishment, and whether someone who commits such atrocities at a young age can ever truly be reformed. The Richardson family murders stand as a chilling reminder that evil knows no age limit, and that the capacity for violence can exist even in those we consider too young to harbor such darkness. We're only halfway through these shocking cases. If you're finding this as unbelievable as I am, give this video a thumbs up. It helps more people discover these true stories and supports the channel. The cases we've covered so far are disturbing enough, but believe me when I say the next two are equally shocking in their own ways. Stay with me. The psychological depths we're about to explore get even darker. Nestled in the Great Smoky Mountains of western North Carolina, Maggie Valley is a picturesque tourist destination known for its stunning vistas, ski resort, and rustic mountain charm. With elevations over 3,000 feet, the area attracts visitors seeking escape from urban life, offering a peaceful retreat among towering pines and crisp mountain air. It's the kind of place where wealthy families build vacation cabins and retirees settle for the tranquility of mountain living. In 2014, one such cabin stood at the end of a winding gravel road, partially hidden by dense forest. This 2,500-square-foot rustic home belonged to Michael Howell, a 50-year-old former sports editor for the Columbia County News-Times in Georgia. After divorcing Crystal's mother years earlier, Michael had moved with his then 17-year-old daughter Crystal to this secluded property, hoping the mountain setting would provide a fresh start for both of them. Michael Howell was well respected in journalistic circles, known for his professionalism and dedication to local sports coverage. Friends described him as a devoted father who had taken on the challenge of raising his teenage daughter alone after the divorce. He maintained a good relationship with his ex-wife, and the arrangement seemed to be working well for everyone involved. Crystal Brooke Howell presented different faces to different people. To some, she was a typical teenager, sometimes moody, sometimes charming, navigating the complexities of adolescence. To others, particularly her father's friends, she seemed increasingly manipulative and entitled. What no one saw, however, was the capacity for violence that lurked beneath her exterior. The father-daughter relationship had grown strained in the months leading up to February 2014. Michael had expressed concerns to friends about Crystal's behavior, noting her excessive spending habits and occasional dishonesty. He had begun implementing stricter rules about her allowance and monitoring her activities more closely, normal parental boundaries that most teenagers face at some point. What happened next was anything but normal. On February 24, 2014, while her father napped on the couch, Crystal retrieved his own 12-gauge shotgun from a cabinet. She positioned herself behind the couch, aimed at the back of her sleeping father's head, and pulled the trigger. The single shot killed Michael Howell instantly. In the immediate aftermath of the murder, Crystal didn't panic. She didn't call police in a fit of remorse. She didn't flee in terror at what she had done. Instead, she methodically began cleaning up the evidence and planning her next steps with a coldness that would later shock investigators. First, she dragged her father's body to the shed behind the cabin, stuffing it into a plastic storage container. She then cleaned the couch and living room area, removing the blood-stained cushion and replacing it with one from another piece of furniture. With the crime scene superficially cleaned, Crystal turned her attention to what many would consider the most disturbing aspect of this case: what to do next. Most teen killers either immediately confess out of remorse or attempt to flee. Crystal did neither. Instead, she saw her father's death as an opportunity for freedom and access to his financial resources. She drove his car to the bank and withdrew money from his account. She used his credit cards to purchase a television and a party supplies, including alcohol. Then, in what can only be described as macabre beyond comprehension, Crystal invited friends to the cabin for an extended party, all while her father's decomposing body remained hidden in the storage shed just yards away. For nearly a month, the cabin became the site of an ongoing celebration. Friends from school came and went, drinking alcohol Crystal purchased with her dead father's money, watching movies on the new television, and enjoying what they believed was simply a parent-free house. Some stayed for days at a time, with as many as 10 teenagers present on some nights. None of the partygoers knew that just outside, the body of Michael Howell was decomposing in a plastic container. During this period, Crystal told various lies to explain her father's absence. To some, she claimed he had committed suicide in the woods. To others, she said he had gone on a business trip. To her father's concerned friends who called or texted, she would respond from his phone with excuses about why he couldn't talk. The web of lies began to unravel when 2 of Crystal's friends were helping move furniture in the cabin and discovered the blood-stained cushion she had attempted to hide. Suspicious, they began looking around the property and made the gruesome discovery in the storage shed. Horrified, the friends immediately contacted police. By then, Crystal had fled to Richmond County, where her mother lived, taking her father's Land Rover and some of his money with her. When authorities arrived at the cabin, they found the disturbing scene: Michael Howell's decomposing body in the storage container, the cleaned-up murder scene inside, and evidence of the weeks-long party that had occurred after his death. The investigation quickly focused on Crystal, who was arrested on March 23, 2014, at a Motel 6 in Augusta, Georgia. During questioning, Crystal offered various explanations for her actions. Initially, she denied any involvement, claiming her father had committed suicide. When confronted with evidence making this impossible, she changed her story multiple times. Perhaps the most bizarre explanation came when she claimed she killed her father because he was planning to sell the family's pet pig, which she had become attached to. This explanation struck investigators as particularly weak, given the premeditated nature of the crime and her behavior afterward. As the case moved toward trial, prosecutors built a strong case against Crystal. The evidence was overwhelming: her fingerprints on the shotgun, her DNA at the crime scene, witness testimony about her lies and behavior after the murder, and financial records showing her spending spree using her dead father's accounts. Faced with this mountain of evidence, Crystal Brooke Howell pleaded guilty in October 2016 to first-degree murder and concealing a death, along with additional charges related to fraud and theft. She was 19 years old at the time of her plea. In court, Crystal finally admitted to killing her father for financial gain. "I went through every emotion possible," she told the judge. I'm so sorry. There's no excuse for what I did." The judge was unmoved by this belated expression of remorse. Noting the calculated nature of the crime and Crystal's disturbing behavior afterward, he sentenced her to 25 years in prison for the murder charge and an additional 5 years for concealing the death, to be served consecutively. This 30-year minimum sentence means Crystal will be at least in her late 40s before she can be considered for release. "The case is disturbing," said Assistant District Attorney Jeff Jones during the sentencing. "It's disturbing that a young lady would kill her father and then bring friends over for a party while he was in a storage building." Michael Howell's family members expressed their grief in victim impact statements, describing him as a loving father who had always put his daughter's needs first. "She just wanted to have her freedom," said Michael's sister, Brenda Ellis. "She wanted to have parties and do things that other teens do, and she was very materialistic." What makes the Crystal Brooke Howell case particularly chilling is not just the murder itself, but the complete lack of emotional response afterward. While many killers act in moments of rage or panic, Crystal's calculated behavior before, during, and after. The murder suggests a profound emotional detachment that mental health professionals find deeply concerning. Today, Crystal serves her sentence at the North Carolina Correctional Institution for Women in Raleigh. Her case stands as a disturbing example of how material desires and a quest for freedom can, in a disturbed mind, justify the most extreme violence, even against a parent. The peaceful mountain cabin in Maggie Valley, once a symbol of new beginnings for a father and daughter, became instead the site of a betrayal so profound it continues to haunt everyone connected to the case. These stories make me question what I really know about people. What's the weather like where you are? Sometimes I wonder if external conditions affect our darkest thoughts. Crystal's crime happened in the isolation of winter in those mountains. Did the seclusion play a role in her thinking? The rolling farmland and dense forests of northern Wisconsin create a landscape of stark beauty and isolation. In Oneida County, where winter temperatures regularly plunge below zero and snow can isolate homes for days, communities are tight-knit by necessity. Towns like Rhinelander and Three Lakes are the kind of places where everyone shops at the same grocery store and attends the same high school football games. It was in this rural setting, in a modest home outside the small town of Peel, population 124, that 17-year-old Ashley Martinson lived with her mother Jennifer Ayers, stepfather Thomas Ayers, and two younger half-sisters. From the outside, the blended family appeared to be making the best of their circumstances in an area where economic opportunities were limited and winters were harsh. But inside the walls of their home, a very different reality existed, at least according to Ashley. Online, Ashley Martinson lived a separate life entirely. Under the username VampChick, she had built a substantial following on a horror fiction website called Wattpad. Her dark, violent stories attracted thousands of readers who were drawn to her vivid descriptions of torture, revenge, and supernatural violence. One of her poems, titled Murder, included the lines, "The sweet taste of blood makes me quiver. I'm completely insane and I'm laughing away as I write this." To her online followers, this was simply creative expression, the kind of gothic horror writing that appeals to many teenagers exploring dark themes through art. No one suspected that the line between Ashley's fiction and reality would soon blur in the most tragic way possible. According to court documents and Ashley's later testimony, life in the Ayers household was far from peaceful. Ashley claimed that her stepfather Thomas was physically abusive toward her mother and emotionally abusive toward her. She described witnessing domestic violence regularly and feeling trapped in a home where tension and fear were constant companions. Her mother Jennifer, Ashley claimed, was unable or unwilling to protect her from Thomas's controlling behavior and verbal abuse. Ashley would later tell investigators that she had reported the abuse to school officials and county social services, but felt her concerns were dismissed or minimized. Whether these claims were entirely accurate became a matter of dispute. Some family members and neighbors suggested the household was troubled, but not abusive, while others corroborated Ashley's accounts of a dysfunctional and sometimes violent home environment. What is undisputed is what happened on March 7, 2015. That Saturday began with yet another argument. Thomas Ayers, 37, had confronted Ashley about her plans to see her boyfriend, 22-year-old Ryan Sisko. The confrontation escalated, with Thomas allegedly threatening to report Sisko to police for statutory rape due to their age difference. Ashley retreated to her bedroom, but her rage continued to build. In what prosecutors would later describe as a calculated decision, she retrieved a shotgun from the family's gun cabinet. She loaded it, walked to the kitchen where Thomas was sitting at the table, and shot him twice, once in the neck and once in the head. The gunshots brought her mother Jennifer running into the kitchen. Seeing her husband dead and her daughter holding the shotgun, Jennifer began screaming. Ashley dropped the shotgun and ran to her bedroom, where she grabbed a knife from her collection. She then pursued her mother through the house, eventually cornering her in the bathroom. There, in a frenzy that suggested both rage and dissociation, Ashley stabbed her 40-year-old mother more than 30 times. With both parents dead, Ashley did something that would later complicate the narrative around her actions. Rather than immediately fleeing, she went to her half-sisters, ages 9 and 2, who had been in another part of the house during the killings. She gathered snacks and drinks for them, put on a movie, and told them not to leave the room. She even locked the bathroom door to prevent them from discovering their mother's body. This act of apparent care for her siblings stood in stark contrast to the violence she had just perpetrated against their parents. Was it evidence of a calculating mind, ensuring the children wouldn't raise an alarm too quickly? Or was it a moment of clarity and compassion in the aftermath of a dissociative rage? Ashley then called her boyfriend Ryan, who picked her up. The couple fled north toward Michigan's Upper Peninsula, stopping at a hotel for the night. It was there, the next day, that police caught up with them after one of Ashley's sisters called a relative who alerted authorities. When arrested, Ashley didn't deny killing her parents. "I know what I did," she reportedly told officers. "I killed them." The case immediately generated competing narratives. The prosecution portrayed Ashley as a calculating killer who had written about murder online and then carried it out in real life when her parents tried to control her behavior. They pointed to her horror writings as evidence of violent fantasies and her relationship with an older boyfriend as motivation for wanting her parents out of the way. The defense painted a very different picture, that of a traumatized teenager who had endured years of abuse and finally snapped. They described the killings not as premeditated murder, but as the desperate act of a child who saw no other escape from a toxic home environment. They pointed to Ashley's care for her sisters as evidence that she wasn't a cold-blooded killer, but a traumatized girl who had experienced a psychotic break. Mental health experts who evaluated Ashley found evidence of post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, and dissociative episodes. Her defense team argued that these conditions, combined with the adolescent brain's still developing capacity for impulse control, should mitigate her culpability. As the case moved toward trial, both sides faced challenges. The prosecution had clear evidence of a double homicide, but would need to convince a jury that a 17-year-old girl with no prior criminal history deserved to spend the rest of her life in prison. The defense had compelling evidence of family dysfunction, but faced the reality that Ashley had killed not just her allegedly abusive stepfather, but also her mother, and in a particularly brutal manner. Facing the possibility of life without parole if convicted at trial, Ashley Martinson accepted a plea deal in March 2016. She pleaded guilty to second-degree intentional homicide in her stepfather's death and first-degree intentional homicide in her mother's death. At her sentencing hearing, Ashley, by then 18, addressed the court. "I'm sorry. I wish I could take it back. I wish I could have talked to somebody or gotten help." The judge acknowledged the evidence of abuse, but also emphasized the severity of taking 2 lives. He sentenced Ashley to 23 years in prison, followed by 17 years of extended supervision, a sentence that recognized both the heinousness of the crimes and the mitigating factors of her age and circumstances. "There is no excuse for taking 2 lives, the judge said, but the court cannot ignore the fact that this case involves a child who endured years in a dysfunctional and violent household." The Martinson case sparked intense debate about juvenile justice, domestic abuse, and mental health intervention. Supporters argued that the system had failed Ashley long before she committed her crimes, pointing to her previous attempts to report abuse. Critics countered that regardless of her home life, the brutality of the killings, particularly of her mother, suggested a dangerous individual who posed an ongoing risk to society. Today, Ashley Martinson serves her sentence at the Taycheedah Correctional Institution in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. She will be in her early 40s when released. Her younger sisters were placed with relatives, their childhood forever marked by a single day of violence that took both their parents and, effectively, their older sister as well. The case remains a troubling example of how family dysfunction, mental health issues, and adolescent development can converge in tragedy, and how the justice system struggles to balance punishment, protection, and rehabilitation when the perpetrator is both victim and villain. I'm still processing these stories, and I bet you are too. If you have thoughts on any of these cases, especially on whether youth should be considered in sentencing, share them in the comments below. The conversation around these cases is just as important as the stories themselves. Was Ashley a calculating killer or a traumatized child who snapped? Your perspective matters, and I read every comment on these videos. Looking across these 4 devastating cases, certain patterns emerge that force us to confront uncomfortable truths about family dynamics and adolescent psychology. Each story began with a common scenario: parents setting boundaries that their teenage daughters found intolerable. What should have been normal friction between generations escalated to unimaginable violence. In all 4 cases, we see the deadly combination of teenage impulsivity and adult consequences. The adolescent brain, still developing its capacity for long-term thinking and emotional regulation, collided with access to lethal means: guns, knives, and, in Erin Caffey's case, manipulated accomplices. The result was irreversible tragedy. Another striking commonality is how these young women compartmentalized their crimes. Crystal hosted parties while her father's body decomposed nearby. Jasmine attended social gatherings the day after killing her family. Ashley cared for her sisters after murdering their parents. This emotional disconnection speaks to either profound psychological disturbance or a terrifying capacity for compartmentalization. These cases also force us to grapple with difficult questions about justice. Jasmine Richardson is now free, living under a new identity after serving just 10 years for killing 3 people. Is this rehabilitation a success story or a failure of justice? Ashley Martinson will serve 23 years. Is this adequate given her claims of prior abuse? Erin Caffey won't be eligible for parole until she's in her 50s. Is this appropriate given her age at the time of her crimes? There are no easy answers, but these questions matter deeply to our understanding of juvenile justice. Finally, we must remember the victims, parents who, whatever their flaws, did not deserve to die at the hands of their children. We must remember innocent siblings like Jacob Richardson and the Caffey boys, whose lives were cut short through no fault of their own. And we must acknowledge the survivors, Terry Caffey, who found the strength to forgive the unforgivable, and the younger siblings of these killers, who must somehow make sense of losing their entire families in a single night of violence. If this investigation kept you on the edge of your seat, make sure you're subscribed and have notifications turned on. We dive into cases like these every week, and I don't want you to miss our next deep dive. Our upcoming episodes will explore more complex true crime cases that challenge our understanding of human behavior and justice. Your support through likes, comments, and shares helps this channel continue bringing these important stories to light. Thanks for watching until the end. It means the world to me. Until next time, stay safe and remember, sometimes the most dangerous threats are closer than we think.